Let me tell you about the night my life shattered and was rebuilt in the same breath. It was the night I agreed to a date with Marco, the golden boy of my university. It was also the night a ghost from the city's underworld, a man whose name was only whispered in fear, pulled me from the wreckage. His name is Dante Moretti. He is the head of the Moretti crime family, a predator in a bespoke suit, and he saved my life by claiming it as his own. Sound crazy? It is. But sometimes, the most dangerous man in the city is the only one who can keep you safe. Have you ever had your world turned upside down by one person? A moment where everything you thought you knew was a lie. Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you want to hear how I went from a broke student to the queen of a criminal empire, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a hell of a lot more real, and way more thrilling. The girl in the mirror was a stranger. I'm Sophia, a 20-year-old psychology student just trying to survive in the concrete jungle of Viridia City. The navy blue dress I'd scraped together $80 for clung to a body I usually hid under baggy sweaters and stacks of textbooks. Tonight was my first real date. Marco, the campus prince, had been pursuing me for months. His charming smiles in lecture halls, the casual study sessions that were more flirtation than academia, it all led to a dinner invitation at Serafina's, Viridia's most exclusive restaurant. A place I'd only ever seen in glossy magazines. Boys like Marco, with his easy confidence and inherited wealth, never looked twice at girls like me. I was the girl who worked part-time at a bookstore to make rent, the one who agonized over every dollar, the one who, until tonight, didn't own a single decent dress. The subway ride from my rundown apartment to the glittering heart of downtown felt like traveling between dimensions. My reflection in the window showed a borrowed confidence. My clutch held everything I owned in the world, $138.50. I counted it 3 times, praying it would magically multiply, praying it would be enough for a meal where the appetizers cost more than my weekly groceries. Friday night in Viridia hums with the scent of money and ambition. The corporate elite streamed out of skyscrapers, their expensive leather shoes clicking on the pavement as they discussed weekend getaways I couldn't earn in a year. The closer I got to the restaurant, the more I questioned Marco's intentions. What did he see in me? The scholarship kid who rotated the same 3 sweaters all winter. Serafina's materialized before me like a movie set. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden light onto polished marble floors. The air, thick with the aroma of garlic, basil, and vintage wine, was so luxurious it felt hard to breathe. The patrons were impeccably dressed, their jackets probably costing more than my semester's rent. They spoke in hushed, important tones while waiters moved with a dancer's grace. Every detail screamed a level of sophistication I couldn't fake. For 2, I told the hostess, my voice steadier than the frantic drumming in my chest. Under Marco. Her perfectly manicured finger traced the reservation list, her eyes flicking over my discount shoes, my budget makeup, and my overwhelming sense of being an imposter. This way, miss. The table was perfect, overlooking the entire dining room. I sank into the velvet chair, feeling like a trespasser. The prices on the menu made my stomach clench. The cheapest pasta was $288. A chicken dish was $358. The fish was $498. My $138 wouldn't even cover the water. 8:15, 8:30. 9 o'clock, the tables around me turned over, filled with laughter and conversation that lapped at my shores of silence. I fought the urge to check my phone, but I kept refreshing my empty inbox anyway. Calls to Marco went straight to voicemail. The initial excitement had curdled into something cold and sharp. A bitter mix of humiliation and a gnawing worry. Had something happened to him? Or Ma'am, will you be ordering now, or shall we continue to wait for your companion? The waiter's voice was laced with a polite disdain that made my cheeks burn. His professional smile didn't hide the impatience and judgment in his eyes. He'll be here any minute, I lied, the taste of ash on my tongue. Could I just have some water, please? The waiter's smile was as sharp as winter ice. Of course. I will give you a few more minutes. But those minutes stretched into an eternity. The whispers and glances from nearby tables felt like tiny needles pricking my skin. I counted my money again. $138.50. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even enough to pretend I belonged here. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number slicing through my crumbling composure like a blade. The debt is overdue. 500,000. You have 48 hours to settle, or you and your emergency contact will face the consequences. You know what we want. An icy dread washed over me, instantly extinguishing the shame and replacing it with a concrete, visceral fear. My hands trembled as I read the message again and again. 500,000. Emergency contact. The words pulsed in front of me, a dark puzzle. It had to be a prank. A wrong number. But the tone was cold, absolute, and it made my chest tighten. Who would list me as an emergency contact? Especially for $500,000. The waiter returned, circling my table like a vulture waiting for its meal to die. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to either order something, or I'll have to ask you to. I'll handle her tab. A deep, magnetic voice cut through the air from behind me, carrying an authority that made the waiter physically recoil. The voice wrapped around me like velvet, quiet but unyielding. I turned. A man stood by my table, his presence so commanding it seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the restaurant. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair meticulously styled and eyes the color of midnight, so deep they felt like they could pull you in. He wore a charcoal gray suit, tailored so perfectly it looked molded to his broad shoulders and lean waist. But it was his face that stole my breath, sharply defined, with a faint, almost invisible scar near his jawline, and a gaze so intense I felt stripped bare. He carried an effortless confidence, the kind that comes from a lifetime of doors being opened, paths being cleared, and rooms falling silent upon his arrival. Sir, this is a private matter. The waiter began to protest, but his voice trailed off under the man's cold stare. The man's eyes never left me. I felt pinned to my seat. Not anymore. He placed a black, featureless card on the table, a casual gesture loaded with finality. Whatever she wants, it's on me. And add a 20% tip for yourself. The next time a woman sits alone in your establishment for 45 minutes, bring her bread and water instead of a condescending attitude. The waiter's demeanor shifted instantly. A fawning smile replaced his earlier scorn. He practically bowed, stammering, "Of course, sir. My sincerest apologies." As the waiter scurried away, the man slid gracefully into the seat opposite me. Up close, his powerful aura was even more suffocating. He smelled of cedar and leather, mixed with some expensive cologne that made my heart race erratically. His long fingers were bare, save for a heavy signet ring on his right pinky, its ancient gold glinting with a complex crest under the light. "You didn't have to do that," I managed, my voice a pathetic squeak. "No one makes a woman cry in my place," he stated, his words landing with the weight of a decree. "Especially not a woman with the courage to wait for a man who clearly doesn't deserve her." My place. The words sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just confidence. This was a man used to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. "How did you know I was waiting for someone?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured to the phone clutched in my hand, its screen still lit with the threatening text. "That message you received. Let me see it. I don't even know who you are." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but his eyes remained deadly serious. "My name is Dante Moretti," he said, the name spoken like both an introduction and a revelation. "And that text is from people you do not want to meet." Dante's gaze was a physical weight, filled with an undeniable power. Against all my instincts to run, I slid the phone across the table. His fingertips brushed mine, a brief touch that sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. He scanned the message, and I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "The Falcone family," he said, the name carrying a gravity I didn't understand. "This message wasn't meant for you. Someone listed you as their emergency contact without your knowledge." His finger tapped the table once, a controlled movement that held more menace than any shout. "The question is, who? And why?" "I don't know anything," my voice was lost in the opulent dining room. $500,000. I don't know anyone with that kind of money. But you know someone foolish enough to borrow it from people who calculate interest in blood. Dante's voice remained calm, but a predator's glint flashed in his dark eyes. "Marco. Viridia University, Jr. Parents run a tech firm out of Silicon Valley. Has a gambling problem, among other hobbies." I stared at him, my mind blank. Not because of the information itself, but because of the casual, almost bored way he reeled it off. How do you know about Marco?" Dante didn't answer. Instead, he made a subtle gesture with his left hand. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted. From the shadows of the restaurant, several men in dark suits materialized, silently taking up positions at the exits and key points. They were like ghosts, unnoticed until they were needed. A waiter approached with a bottle of wine I couldn't name, but knew was ruinously expensive. He poured for us with reverent care, then vanished at an almost invisible nod from Dante. "In my business, information is currency," Dante said, lifting his glass but not drinking. "And right now, you are sitting in the middle of a transaction that could get you killed." He leaned forward slightly. The scent of cedar and danger intensified, making my heart hammer against my ribs. "Marco owes the Falcones $500,000. And the Falcones have a very creative approach to debt collection." The elegant scene around us continued, a symphony of clinking glasses and refined laughter. And here I was, discussing death threats with a stranger, as if we were talking about the weather. "You're saying Marco used my name as collateral for his illegal gambling debt?" Worse, Dante's eyes were like X-rays, seeing through every layer of my composure. "The Falcones don't distinguish between willing participants and innocent collateral. If Marco doesn't pay, they will use everything at their disposal to apply pressure. That includes you." I could barely breathe. The safe little world I had built for myself, my dedication to my studies, my hard work to escape the kind of violence that had claimed my parents, it was all being dragged into the gutter. "I need to call the police." "And tell them what?" "You got a threatening text. Someone used your name without permission." Dante's smile held no warmth. "The VCPD has bigger problems. By the time they take you seriously, you will have disappeared." The certainty in his tone chilled me to the bone. This wasn't a threat, it was a professional assessment. "Then what do I do?" "You accept my protection," he said without hesitation. "Until we've dealt with Marco's problem. You are not safe on your own." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Accept protection from a stranger. A stranger who knows everything about me. How is that any different from a threat?" Dante's expression didn't change, but he shifted slightly in his seat, a subtle adjustment that made him seem even more imposing. I was suddenly aware again of his men, the silent sentinels guarding every exit. "The difference," he said simply, "is that I'm giving you a choice. The Falcons won't." The phone on the table buzzed again. It was Marco. "Sophia, so sorry about tonight, family emergency came up. Rain check." The casual tone, with no mention of the threat I'd received, made my stomach turn. "He doesn't know they've contacted you," Dante said, reading the text over my shoulder, his breath warm on my neck. "Which means he's either naive or catastrophically stupid. Maybe he really did have a family emergency." I murmured, not even believing it myself. "Sophia," Dante said my name with a strange mix of intimacy and possession that made something deep inside me stir. "Look at this restaurant. Look at these people. Marco didn't bring you here to impress you with his money. His family has money, but not casual dinner at Serafina's money. He brought you here because he needed to be seen by the right people." His long finger tapped the table again, the sound echoing the beat of my heart. "He was using you as a cover." The pieces clicked into place. The months of attention, the flirtatious banter, the date that was far beyond his means. I wasn't the object of his affection. I was a prop. A prop to maintain the illusion of a normal life while his was spiraling out of control. "How long have you been watching me?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Not you," Dante corrected. "Marco." The honesty, after months of Marco's calculated deception, felt like a precious gift. "But you kept appearing in the background of his surveillance. The scholarship student who works at the bookstore. The independent girl who never asks too many questions." He held my gaze with those deep, dark eyes. "You were perfect for him." A hot, clean anger burned through me, scouring away the hours of humiliation and fear. "And what about you? What do you want from me?" "To keep you alive," he replied, the simple answer catching me off guard. "The Falcons have your name now. They'll run a background check, just like I did. Family history, financials, social connections, every vulnerability. They'll find the car accident that killed your parents. They'll find your student loans, your job at the bookstore. They will find every pressure point in your life, and they will squeeze until they get what they want." "What do they want?" "Marco," Dante leaned back, the movement both elegant and predatory. "But if they can't find him, they'll happily make an example of someone he cares about." He offered a smile as sharp as broken glass. "Even if he doesn't." I refused Dante's offer to take me to one of his safe houses. The term conjured images of windowless rooms and locked doors that made me shudder. I insisted on returning to my small apartment in the old district, clinging to the idea that its familiar walls could offer some comfort. Dante didn't argue, which was more unnerving than if he had. He simply nodded, made another almost invisible gesture, and I knew that whether I wanted it or not, his protection would follow me like a shadow. On the subway ride back, every passenger became a potential threat. I forced myself to memorize faces, a student cramming for a test on survival. Dante wasn't with me, having left to attend to business, but his absence only amplified my anxiety. Men like him didn't leave loose ends. My apartment building was the same as ever-worn brick, a faulty buzzer, the air thick with the accumulated smells of decades of life. But as I climbed the 4 flights of stairs, I felt like an intruder in my own home. The girl who had left for a date was gone, replaced by a woman who checked corners before entering a room, who strained to hear footsteps that didn't belong. The changes began subtly. The overdue electric bill that had been keeping me up at night was marked as paid in full when I checked online. The internet service I was planning to cancel to save money had been upgraded to the fastest package, free of charge. I called the utility company, and they said an anonymous benefactor had not only cleared my balance, but paid for the next 6 months. The ISP told me the same story. My hands were shaking when I hung up. Dante was infiltrating my life with surgical precision, identifying my weaknesses and fixing them without my permission. The money should have been a relief, but it felt more like a set of golden handcuffs, beautiful and unbreakable. The next morning at 8, a soft but persistent knock came at my door. I'd barely slept, startled by every creak and groan of the old building. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive coat, holding several garment bags and wearing a professionally trained smile. "Miss Sophia. Mr. Moretti sent these for you." The clothes were breathtaking. Silks, cashmeres, fabrics I couldn't name but knew were costly. There were power suits for navigating his world, evening gowns that would have turned heads at Serafina's, and casual wear that made my tiny apartment look even more pathetic. I dialed the number from Dante's business card, my anger building with each ring. When he answered, his voice held that same sense of total control. "I assume you received the delivery. I'm not your doll to dress up, and I'm not your charity case." I snapped, the ferocity in my voice surprising even myself. "You can't just pay my bills and buy me a new wardrobe." "You are not my charity case," he agreed, and something in his tone gave me pause. "You are under my protection." "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "You're still controlling my life without asking." "I am keeping you alive," he said, the weight of his words silencing me. "The Falcons don't care about your independence or your pride. They care about leverage and results. If you're going to survive, you need to understand the rules of the world you've been dragged into." That night, he took me to another dinner. Not Serafina's, but somewhere quieter, more exclusive. A place I'd never heard of because it wasn't advertised, and didn't accept reservations from just anyone. The manager greeted him as Mr. Moretti, with a deep reverence, leading us to a private room where crystal glasses sparkled like stars in the candlelight. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "This place, officially, doesn't exist," Dante explained as a waiter began serving courses, each one a work of art that probably cost more than my weekly food budget. "The chef is Paris-trained, the wine is from a private vineyard, and the clientele is limited to those who understand the value of discretion." I watched him as he ate, his movements as precise and efficient as everything else he did. His grace was a stark contrast to my awkwardness, highlighting the chasm between our worlds. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to know what you're up against," he said, putting down his fork to give me his full, undivided attention. "The Falcons operate in this world. The deals made over $1 million bottles of wine. The handshakes that reshape entire industries. The conversations that are never recorded but change everything." His gaze made me fidget with my napkin. I was acutely aware of the expensive dress against my skin, the unfamiliar weight of the jewelry he'd sent. Tonight was a seduction. The atmosphere, the luxury, and the full attention of a man whose mere presence commanded respect. "And you? What's your reason for being here?" A flicker of something I couldn't decipher, something heavy and complex, crossed his eyes. "I inherited it. My parents were killed when I was 18, and I took over an enterprise my family had been building for generations." His voice was tinged with a weariness that didn't match his age. "Sometimes the only choice is to become what everyone else fears, or be destroyed by those who already are." The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Under the bespoke suit and the aura of power, Dante was only 32. A man carrying a burden far too heavy for his years. "Your parents?" "A car bomb," he said, his tone flat, as if reciting a historical fact. Arranged by the Falcons over a long-standing territory dispute. They wanted to send a message about the price of defiance. The words car bomb, territory dispute should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself looking at him in a new light. The scar on his jaw, his habit of sitting with his back to the wall, his constant awareness of exits and threats. It wasn't posturing, it was a survival manual written in blood. How long have you been fighting them? 14 years, the number hung in the air between us, a testament to half a lifetime of conflict and violence. Since the night I decided I'd received their message, and it was time to send one back. A waiter moved silently to refill our glasses. Our conversation had veered into a dark, intimate space. Dante was showing me a side of himself that few, if any, ever saw. Not the businessman, not the dangerous authority figure, but a young man thrust into a world of violence and responsibility before he was ready. So is that what this is? You're using me to send another message? No, he said, the directness of the answer surprising me. This is about a feeling I haven't had in 14 years. He leaned forward again, that scent of cedar and danger enveloping me. The desire to protect something purely because I want to, not because I have to. The confession hung between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. In the candlelight, the sharp angles of Dante's face seemed to soften. He was no longer a cold marble statue, but a man of flesh and blood. The danger was still there, but it was tempered by something that might have been longing. I should go home, I said, though the word felt hollow. You should, he agreed, and a smile transformed his face, making him look younger, approachable. But you won't. Because as much as you tell yourself you want a quiet life, a life away from the violence that took your parents, you are fascinated by what happens next. He wasn't wrong. We both knew it. The timid girl stood up at Serafina's was still there, but a new woman was standing beside her. A woman who felt more alive than ever before, drawn like a moth to the controlled danger Dante represented. It should have been a warning, but it felt like permission. What happens next? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Dante's smile deepened. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely happy. Now, we go and find out just how much trouble Marco is really in. And then, we decide what to do about it. 10 months later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of our penthouse apartment, looking down on Viridia City as it pulsed in the afternoon sun. From 40 floors up, everything looked small. Central Park was a green carpet stretching north, and the Viridia River caught the last of the sun's rays like a scattering of diamonds. My reflection in the glass showed a woman I barely recognized. The terrified college student abandoned at Serafina's was gone. In her place was a woman wearing an expensive suit, tailored to accommodate the slight curve of my pregnant belly. My hair was the work of a professional stylist, not cheap shampoo and a prayer. But the biggest change was in my eyes. There was a confidence there, a hardness forged by exposure to violence and betrayal. Mrs. Moretti, your 4 o'clock appointment is here, came the voice of Dante's personal assistant, Sal, through the intercom. After the Falcone family was dismantled, we had consolidated operations, running the legitimate businesses, and the less than legal aspects of Dante's empire from our home. Send him up, I replied, straightening a file on my desk detailing the acquisition of 3 properties in the Queens District. It was, on paper, a real estate investment. In reality, it was a strategic expansion into the power vacuum left by the Falcones' fall. I had discovered an unnerving talent for turning violence into legitimate profit. 5 minutes later, a man was escorted into my office. He was nervous, the kind of nervous you get when you know who you're dealing with and you're hoping politeness will be your shield. Martin Wong, owner of a construction firm that had been cutting corners on city contracts for the better part of a decade. Dante's people had found the rot, and now Mr. Wong was here to discuss how to make his problem disappear. "Mr. Wong," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. "Thank you for coming. I understand you've had some issues with your municipal contracts." Yes, some minor accounting discrepancies," he stammered, his eyes darting around the office, taking in the expensive furniture and priceless art, the trappings of power that made him feel even smaller. "Nothing a little oversight can't fix." "Of course," I said, opening his file, which contained the exhaustive research Sal's team had compiled over the last month. $2.3 million in materials diverted from public projects over 18 months. That's a significant discrepancy. The color drained from Mr. Wong's face. "I don't know what you mean." "I'm not implying anything," I cut him off with a calm authority I'd learned from Dante. "I'm stating a fact. The only question now is whether you'd prefer to resolve this privately or through more official channels." My psychology degree, once so theoretical, was now a more effective weapon than Sal's sidearm. I knew how to read people, to find their pressure points, to apply just enough fear to get the result I wanted. "What do you want?" he whispered. "A partnership." I slid a contract across the desk, its terms pre-drafted based on our psychological profile of him. "Your company becomes a preferred contractor for Moretti Holdings. In exchange, the discrepancies vanish, and you are given access to projects that will triple your annual revenue within 2 years." It wasn't a choice, and we both knew it. Mr. Wong could sign the contract and prosper under Dante's protection, or he could refuse and face criminal charges and financial ruin. 20 minutes later, he signed his name with a trembling hand. "Welcome to the family," I said as he was leaving. "Sal will give you the contact for the new project lead. You'll find this is a mutually beneficial arrangement." After he left, I returned to the window, my hand resting on my belly. 6 months along. Our child. The heir to everything Dante and I were building. The thought should have been terrifying, bringing a baby into a world where violence was a constant threat. Instead, I felt a fierce, protective calm. "How did it go?" Dante's voice, now a familiar comfort, came from behind me. I turned to see him leaning against the doorframe, his tie loosened and his hair slightly mussed, making him look younger and more approachable. "Mr. Wong is a reasonable man," I said, stepping into his arms. It felt like coming home. "His construction firm will be very useful for our expansion plans in the Bronx." Dante's hands settled on my waist, carefully avoiding the swell of my stomach. "And how do you feel about expansion?" It was a loaded question, about more than just business. It was about my comfort level with the potential for violence, my willingness to be a party to the decisions that could ruin other lives while solidifying our own. "I think we're ready," I said, surprised at how natural it felt. "The Falcone territory has been leaderless for too long. Smaller players are getting ambitious. Better to consolidate control before someone gets brave enough to challenge us." Like Anthony Falcone, Dante's expression hardened. Intelligence reports indicated that Oldman Falcone's youngest son, the one who'd escaped the purge, was making noise about avenging his family. "He's been building alliances in Jersey and Philly. Then we deal with him before he becomes a real threat." The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. The psychology student from a year ago would have been horrified by her own coldness. Now, it just felt like strategic planning to protect what we'd built. "I was thinking there might be a way to handle this without an open war," Dante said, a smile of appreciation and pride touching his lips. "What kind of way?" "The kind that uses his own psychology against him." I moved to my desk and pulled up the detailed behavioral analysis on Anthony Falcone and his associates. He's motivated by family honor and personal revenge, but he's also pragmatic. We just need to make the cost of action clear before he makes a move. And if he doesn't take the deal, then he learns what happens when you underestimate our resolve to protect our family, I said, my hand instinctively going back to my stomach. The thought of anyone threatening the life we were building made my protective instincts razor sharp. Some lessons are only taught by example. Dante pulled me closer, his arms a protective circle around me and our unborn child, the same protective force that had drawn me to him in the first place. Have I told you lately how much I love the woman you've become? You helped make me this woman, I corrected, my mind flashing back to the girl waiting alone at Serafina's. Though I'm still not sure if it was by accident or by design. A little of both, he admitted. I knew you were strong enough to survive in this world. I just didn't know you'd become essential to running it. The intercom buzzed again. It was Sal, signaling the start of our weekly security briefing. It had become our routine, the way we managed threats and planned our next move. Ready for another week of empire building? Dante asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Always. I took my seat at the head of the conference table, opposite his. Our home was both a sanctuary and a command center. Sal entered with his usual efficiency, followed by 3 of Dante's most trusted capos. They nodded at me, not just as Dante's wife, but as a woman who had earned her place at the table with intellect and strategy. The Anthony Falcone situation is escalating faster than anticipated, Sal began without preamble. He's reached out to families in Boston and Chicago for support, claiming a war of justice against his brother's killers. Any takers? I asked, my mind already running through the psychological profiles and potential pressure points of those families. 2 maybes, 1 hard no, Sal said, consulting his notes. But he's also recruiting independent muscle. Desperate men who will kill for a promise. Dante's face went rigid, the familiar look he got right before necessary violence was deployed. How many are we talking about? Potentially 15 to 20 men, plus whatever support those families offer. Sal's assessment was sobering and thorough. Not enough for a direct confrontation, but enough to cause significant damage before we could eliminate them. Then we don't give them a direct confrontation, I said, an idea beginning to form. We give Anthony an offer he can't refuse. And at the same time, we show him exactly what will happen if he does. What kind of offer? Dante asked, his attention focused solely on me, a sign that he was taking my strategy seriously. I smiled, feeling the pieces click into place like a complex psychological puzzle. The kind that appears to give him everything he wants, but is structured in a way that he can never use it against us. And if he's smart enough to see the trap, we make sure he's not smart enough to survive refusing it. The admission should have felt wrong, discussing a man's life and death with the same detachment as a corporate takeover. But it felt like protecting my family, ensuring the world Dante and I were building for our child would endure. I love you, Mrs. Moretti, Dante murmured amidst the hum of the meeting, his voice filled with the same admiration and protectiveness that had started it all. I love you too, Mr. Moretti, I replied, looking out at the vibrant city below, our child growing safely within the empire we had carved out of violence and strategy. I love what we've built. This was not the life I had planned, but it was our life. A life forged by choice and consequence, where 2 people broken by violence had become partners in building their own kind of order in a chaotic world. As I felt a gentle kick from within my womb, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. As equal partners in power. As partners in this beautiful, dangerous life we had chosen to create.